I want you to consider this morning's comments, this morning's sermon, a play that has 3 acts. And I'm going to start with the first act. This past Wednesday, a few nights ago, Deanna and I went into the city and we saw the play by Tom Stoppard called Leopoldstadt. It is a brilliant play. It is his reckoning with his Jewish background, which he, as a successful British playwright, hadn't really thought about much less expressed in theatrical form. And while I won't tell you how it ends, you can probably draw upon your sense of history to know that a play that starts about a Viennese Austrian family in 1899 is not going to end very happily, certainly not for many members of that family. The play traces this family in 1899, in the 1920s, and then in 1938, as the family is experiencing the beginnings of the trauma of the Shoah, though arguably the trauma started to rumble, started to be felt years before that. And the name of my play in 3 acts is What Do We Tell the Children? So here's what I mean by that. Starting with this play, Leopoldstadt, has many children. The children are hanging around in the living room of the family's beautiful apartment. And in one scene, they're celebrating Christmas. Why? Because some members of the family converted to Christianity, believing that that would allow them to achieve more in society. There's a scene where the children are celebrating the Passover Seder because some members of the family wanted those who were strongly connected to their Jewish identity to feel comfortable. The children are hearing all sorts of conversations. They're hearing their parents say, "We used to have to live in the ghetto. We don't have to live there anymore. That's never going to happen again." They hear the adults around them talking about a guy named Theodor Herzl and his strange ideas about how Jews should go back and live in the biblical land of Israel, then Palestine. And they're saying to each other, why would we want to go back to a desert when we have all of the intellect and culture right here? What do we tell the children? Do we tell our children that it is dangerous to be a Jew? Do we tell our children that sometimes they should hide being a Jew? Do we tell them that Israel is a good place to be a Jew, that Israel is the best place to be a Jew? That's the end of Act 1. There's no intermission in this play. The second act consists of the story of Esther, as we call it, the Megillah. The story of Esther is about our people living outside of the lands where we have sovereignty. Takes place in Persia. It is about our exalted status. Mordechai rose very far. Mordechai had access to the palace. Esther had access. It's also about our vulnerability. It's about a hater who says to the king, "These people cannot be trusted. They do not observe the law of the land." This may be one of the first times where the Jewish people are accused of not having sufficient loyalty to their secular rulers. Esther hides who she is. She doesn't tell the king that she is a Jew. Why not? Mordechai said, keep it a secret. Why did he tell her to keep it a secret? Was he trying to protect her? Or maybe he knew that one day there would be value in her sharing that secret. Indeed, he turned out to be right. This is a story about identity. It's also a story about influence. Why does the king listen to Haman? There's one little verse which said that Haman gave a ton of money to the king. Why does the king listen to Esther? Here I will say, because we have many ages gathered here this morning, thank God. that there's a lot of double entendre in this story. Read those passages carefully, and you understand why the king was so attached to Esther. So ultimately, it is about identity, and it is about influence. Mordechai gets very, very far. He becomes Mishneh LaMelech, number 2. Is the story telling us that outside of Israel, when we don't have sovereignty, that's the best we can do, is to be number 2 to the king, whom we have to appease again and again? There is so much to process, but here's the thing. What do we tell the children? The story of Esther is not a children's story. We teach it to children, of course we do, but there is so much in there that only adults can understand about power, about vulnerability, about what it means to be a Jew in the world, about whether you are safer when you have sovereignty or safer when you don't have sovereignty, about how you use your influence, about how you navigate the terrain of a world that can often be very, very harsh. So I think that the story of Esther is an opportunity to begin to teach children as they emerge into adulthood that it's complicated to be Jewish, and yet at the same time, it is an incredible opportunity and right that we have been given to impact the world in positive ways, to not allow our haters to define us, to continue to define what it means for us to bring goodness and light into the world. That was Act 2. And here's Act 3. Tuesday, the night before Deanna and I saw the play, I had the second session of the senior seminar that I'm doing with our graduating seniors. And they're an amazing group. They're all going to be going off in their own directions next year. I want to take this opportunity to have intensive conversation with them about important things, about their Jewish identities, about anti-Semitism, about Israel, about relationships. And this past Tuesday, the topic was, how do you relate to Israel? So I asked that question to them, and I said, pair up and talk to each other for a few moments. Have you visited Israel? Have you not visited Israel? If you visited Israel, what was your favorite aspect of seeing Israel? If not, what is it that you hold in most high regard about Israel? And I also said, talk as well about some things that you found curious or maybe even frustrating. Israel isn't perfect. And so we had what I would characterize as a deep conversation about what it means to love Israel, what it means to protect Israel, what it means to speak out when people are saying things about Israel that are false, and what it also can mean to identify certain things about Israel that are not perfect, to be critical in ways that don't undermine Israel, but that perhaps can ultimately be helpful. We had that full conversation, and it was an important conversation because they're no longer children. They are emerging adults. It was important to give them the tools to have the conversation about what it means to be a Jewish person at this point in time. So what do we tell the children? Of course, when they're younger, we tell them in appropriate ways how beautiful it is to be Jewish, and we tell them in appropriate ways that there are certain challenges. But it's equally important that we continue across the lifespan as they emerge as teenagers into adult lives to talk to them about the challenges and also the beauties of being a Jewish human being. How do you deal with the joys and the challenges of being Jewish, whether it is in Austria, or in Iran, or in Morocco, or in Hungary, or Cuba, or the United States of America, where we don't have full sovereignty? There are challenges of being Jewish in places where we don't have national sovereignty over our fate. And folks, there are also challenges to being Jewish in Eretz Yisrael where we do have sovereignty over our fate. They are a different set of challenges. We can't have blinders on. We cannot continue to tell children's stories that don't match an adult world. The final place that I want to take us to this morning, there's so much to process, so much to think about, is the importance of urging our children to keep on learning and engaging as Jews well into their adult lives. And here I want to point out in the most delicate but appreciative way, the grandmother of our bar mitzvah this morning participated in our adult b'nai mitzvah learning program. She did that with her sisters and with her brother, right? They stood up here. Why? Because they, as adults, wanted to embrace the beauty of being Jewish. And you know who benefited the most? Their children and their grandchildren, by seeing this is something that lasts a lifetime. This is Eitz Chaim. This is the tree that lasts throughout our entire lives. Please, I am urging, I am begging, let us continue to educate our children when they are no longer children, so that they can face the world as prepared and proud Jews. And now, a final symbol. We read about the light of the Ner Tamid, the light that was supposed to last all the time. Our ancestors had to bring the oil so that that light would always, always, always be lit. What do we learn from that? The light has to remain lit throughout our lives. Not just when we are 5 years old and learning about the beauty contest that didn't quite happen that way in the Megillah story. Not when we are 7 years old alone and learning that the good guys and the bad guys are just so simple. But as we become teens and as we become adults, the light has to continue to be lit so that we as Jewish people can illuminate the rest of the world with our light and with our goodness as long as we are alive. And that is the conclusion of Act 3, and Act 4 begins right now. Shabbat Shalom.